Okay, so today we're diving into a story about a story. It's one that's been told for centuries. But here's the twist. What if I told you the version we all know and love is a complete, radical reinvention of the original?
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. How does a story's villain become its hero? We're going to look at how one of literature's most infamous characters was totally transformed, over time, into a celebrated hero. It's this incredible, almost magical process.
So, you've probably heard of the story of Yusuf and Zuleikha, right? It's an absolute classic. But the version we all think of, that big, epic romance, is so different from where it all started. I mean, the original story had a completely different point and, yeah, a very, very different bad guy.
So, to really get how this huge change happened, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the original blueprint, the very first version, which was basically a moral tale.
Yeah, the first life of the story was all about being a moral lesson, a teaching tool. Its whole purpose wasn't really entertainment or romance. It was designed to teach a very clear lesson about right versus wrong, virtue versus sin, all based on divine law.
And in this original version, the lines are super clear. Zuleikha, she's the wife of a powerful guy who, driven by pure lust, tries to seduce Yusuf, who's enslaved in her household. Her actions are framed as a straight-up betrayal. Yusuf, on the other hand, he's the model of piety. He resists temptation, he upholds his virtue. So Zuleikha isn't some tragic lover here. No way. She's the villain, the antagonist. She's meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when desire runs wild. The whole story is this black and white conflict between sin and virtue.
But that's not the story that survived. It's not the one that echoed through centuries of poetry and art. Over time, something pretty incredible happened. The public, the people telling and listening to the story, they took this moral tale and gave it a complete overhaul. They turned it into a folk masterpiece with a totally different soul.
And in this new version, Zuleikha isn't the villain anymore. Not even close. She's the hero. Her desire gets completely reframed. It's not lust anymore. It's a pure, all-consuming love. The whole story pivots to focus on her journey, her suffering, and her incredible devotion. She becomes the person we're actually supposed to be rooting for.
Okay, so when you put these two versions side by side, the change is just stunning. I mean, look at this. Zuleikha goes from villain to hero. The whole point of the story switches from being a lesson on chastity to this epic tale of devotion. And the vibe? It goes from a cautionary tale that makes you judge her to a romance that makes you feel for her. It's a complete 180.
So the big question is, how does a story change that dramatically? And why? Why did an entire culture feel the need to just rewrite it? Well, this was no accident. It was a deliberate, collective act of storytelling.
Well, researchers who've studied this point to something they call a collective consciousness. What that means is, over generations, the community, the people listening to and telling the story, they actively reshaped it. They weren't just getting it wrong or misremembering details. Nope, they were intentionally molding it into a story that made more sense to them, one that really connected with their own values and what they needed emotionally.
And at its heart, the reason why is pretty simple. The original moral tale, with all its focus on sin and punishment, just didn't sit right with people. It conflicted with what they wanted from a good story. They weren't looking for a narrative that just judged people. They craved a story that gave them empathy, that celebrated loyalty, and that, in the end, delivered some kind of redemption.
So how'd they actually do it? Well, the main tool for this massive rewrite is a technique that scholars call event enhancement. It's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. Instead of just saying, oh, Zuleikha is a good person now, the storytellers added brand new events to the plot. And these new events completely changed the context and the motivations for everybody.
And this is exactly how they pulled it off. It's brilliant, really. First, they added prophetic dreams. So now Zuleikha sees Yusuf when she's just a girl, which makes her love feel like it was destined, not just some sudden temptation. Second, and this is a masterstroke, they made her husband impotent. Boom! The whole moral problem of betrayal is just gone. Third, a divine voice comes in and tells Zuleikha that she will end up with Yusuf, which basically justifies her entire quest. And finally, she gets a full-on redemption arc. After all her suffering, her youth is magically restored and she finally marries Yusuf. The villain literally becomes the hero of her own story.
It wasn't just about adding new stuff either. They also reinterpreted scenes that were already there. Take that iconic moment, right? Zuleikha is being mocked by other noblewomen, so she invites them all to a banquet. She gives each of them a sharp knife and a citron, a torange, to peel. Then Yusuf walks in, and the women are so stunned by his beauty that they accidentally cut their own hands instead of the fruit. But in the folktale, this becomes way more than just a distraction. It's all about what that fruit actually symbolizes.
See, in the folk tradition, this scene isn't just to show how handsome Yusuf is. The citron itself takes on this really powerful symbolic meaning. In Jewish belief, the torange is a symbol for the human heart. And in Islamic culture, a pure heart is seen as the place where divine love resides. So think about it. The women cutting their hands isn't just an accident. It's a symbol of their hearts being wounded by a love so powerful it's almost divine. This completely elevates Zuleikha's passion from just earthly lust to something much bigger, a transcendent spiritual quest.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why does the transformation of this one ancient story still matter to us today? What does it really tell us about storytelling itself?
Well, it shows us that stories aren't these static, fixed things like monuments carved in stone. They're alive. They're living, breathing documents. We don't just passively consume them, we interact with them. Communities are always adapting, reinterpreting, and even rewriting their most beloved tales so that they better reflect who they are, what they believe, and what they really need from a story.
And ultimately, the two lives of this incredible tale reveal a really profound truth about us. We have this deep, collective need for stories that go beyond simple black and white judgment. We want stories that get into the messy complexities of the human heart, that champion empathy for people who have fallen, that believe in the possibility of redemption, and that celebrate the enduring, life-changing power of love.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. Because this process of rewriting stories didn't just stop centuries ago. It is absolutely happening right now, with our modern myths, our fairy tales, our biggest blockbuster movies. So think about it. What villains are we turning into heroes today? What stories are we, all of us together, rewriting to better reflect who we are right now?